Thank you, everyone, for joining me on another month's episode of Sitting Down with Scholars. This month, I'm joined by Anna, a PhD candidate. And Anna, could you start off by telling myself and my guests a bit about your career and research so far?
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a PhD candidate slash student at Dublin City University. I'm in my third year. My PhD program is 4 years long. Before this, I did a master's, which was a joint degree between University of Bologna and Zagreb. It was the degree in Eastern European Studies, and before that, I actually studied French language and literature at the University of Sarajevo. So right now, I am doing a PhD in communications, which is more political communication and how authoritarian regimes communicate with the public and so on. But I did not start off thinking I'll do that. I'll be doing that. I kind of after high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I'd probably end up being a teacher of like in high school of French, most likely. Um, and throughout my studies, I started participating in a lot of extracurricular activities, a lot of peace building initiatives in the Balkans, and all of that sort of thing. And I landed on political communication eventually, but it wasn't my original plan. It just kind of happened slowly, a slow burn over time. So I did a master's in Eastern European Studies, and now I'm doing this. But yeah, 10 years ago, if you asked me, I would have probably just been like, I'm just going to be a teacher in a high school.
And it snuck upon you.
Yeah.
So I know, speaking of obviously you still having an interest in teaching, I know because we've spoke before that you do some teaching as part of your role as a PhD candidate currently. How did you find that? How did your institution approach it?
Yeah, actually, I think it's sort of, you're right. It's sort of like I guess just gradual path. Cause like I always did want to teach. It's just that I change the subject that I want to teach. So yeah, as a part in my institution, there's like I don't know. It used to be a written rule. A lot of things changed. That we have to satisfy a certain amount of hours if we receive the scholarship from the school itself, which I do. So I don't remember the amount of hours that used to be necessary. Now it's not so solid. But typically PhD students are expected to help with teaching assistance and tutoring um, for at very, very least 2 semesters. Um, Personally, I've done it for 3 or 4, I think. And some semesters have been more difficult than others because when you're doing a PhD, during some periods there's more intense writing that needs to happen, and sometimes there's interesting conferences that are happening just that year, just that month. So you don't want to miss out on it because it's a great opportunity and it's really something that has to, like, it's really connected to your topic. So you kind of have to power through. And sometimes teaching obligations clash with that. But I've enjoyed the fact that I can get to do that because, where I'm from, like in Bosnia, PhD students don't get those opportunities most often. Um, so it's really interesting from that perspective that in Ireland and UK, you get that opportunity, which I think when you graduate gives you a bit of an advantage because you already have, depending on how much you want to take on, you already have maybe a year or two or maybe even 3 of teaching experience, which in continental Europe you don't get as much. So I think that's interesting.
It's interesting, like you say, and certainly from my own experience. So, whilst having a background in teaching, so I've done a fair amount outside or before my PhD, but at my current institution, we don't actually have a requirement for PhD students to teach. And I know a lot of the other London universities are, broadly speaking, quite similar. It's encouraged, but it's not something that is mandatory. I mean, individual supervisors and students will decide on something, but generally there's no hard and fast rule. But I will definitely agree with you that a lot of the UK based institutions do have normally a minimum of at least 10 hours where they must do some form of teaching delivery.
Yeah.
And not saying this is the best way of doing it, but some PhDs I've known that tend to end up with statistics as the key module that they end up with, which some people really love that and throw themselves into it, and some it's not their favorite and it's not their bag.
Yeah, yeah, I do remember from my own masters, nobody likes to teach methodological courses, and it usually ends up with the youngest associate professor. Even in continental Europe, usually methodology is always kind of given sort of as this is your trial by fire, good luck, nobody wants to do this. You're the youngest, you do this. But no, in my institution, you mostly get to like do seminars, and when it comes to like teaching, it's not you don't really do that as much. Maybe like in your third year and your fourth year, you get approached to maybe take on some modules, but in the first 2 years, you're mostly discussing with students, helping them understand some philosophical text or something, some theories that are hard for them to understand because they're first year or second year. So you sit down with them and discuss like what they've read. It's mostly that. It's mostly like seminars um, and grading. So yeah.
Yeah, like you say, the more of the assistance role slowly transitioning into more of a actual teaching based role. And yeah, I've been there with the whole marking scenario where you end up with a lot of marking, and I mean, a lot of them are skills that's certainly worth getting. It's I would say for anyone who's thinking of doing a PhD, just making sure that you balance it properly because you've got to equally stand up for yourself and that respect, and don't feel like you have to do it just purely because you can. It is a discussion, not just if it's too much. Say it's too much earlier and set that boundary. And hopefully your supervisors will take that on board because the PhD should be the main thing. But I'd imagine across the board there will be variations of how positive that conversation will go, as most discussion will do.
Yeah, yeah, I would say the same. Like, take it on for a year or two, but like I don't think anyone should push themselves like in the last stages of your PhD when you really need to rewrite chapters. Maybe leave space for your actual thesis. You know, you do your part at points where it's most comfortable for you to do your part, but like don't die trying to do it.
Exactly. And with your particular area of research, Anna, it's what for most people, political communication and particularly how authoritarian regimes communicate. It's a very specific and very hot topic area at the moment. But what drove you to pursue that path? I know you've gone from a more of a language and linguistics side into so what was the real driver?
Oh, I think it was sort of the period of when I started gaining political consciousness. Because when I was growing up, I was born in 93. Not the greatest time to be born in any of the former Yugoslav states. And then my first memories were going to protests with my parents. And I kind of vaguely remember this whole push for democracy and how happy my parents were and how welcoming everyone was towards democracy. And um, how my parents kept saying that they're so happy I'll get to have a better 20s than they did, better, like, cause they were in their 20s throughout the 90s and it wasn't great for them. So they were really looking forward to my 20s and hoping that it's going to be way better than it was for them. And my 20s came around 2010s, um, when a very similar thing happened. So there was a lot of discussions where, you know, I remembered how they thought if we move here, if we move there, everything's going to be better. Everything's going to be better. If I learn this, then everything's going to be better. If I go to university, I'm going to have so many opportunities. If I learn many languages, then I'm going to have opportunities. If then, and then we kind of collectively as a family did everything if then. And then 2010s happened. And it's sort of like, okay, well, there was no guarantee against this, I guess. And I think I couldn't just like, it was like just watching a car crash happen. And I was just like, I don't know, I'm compelled to write about this, I guess. I do not recommend it as a topic because I'm currently very much, struggling, to be honest. I know it became a hot topic for everyone a few months ago, a few years ago. But when I started this PhD, I was really, really, really hoping that my introduction is going to be, this is how things were. And this was a point in time. And now everything is different towards my conclusion and everything. And I just wanted to record this bubble in time that is gone now and is not happening. But it seems like I'm approaching the end, and maybe for my future research funding, this is great. But for my mental health, it's absolutely not. I was really hoping by the end of my 4th year, there's going to be something like, I recorded this bubble in time and now it's gone.
Yeah, rather than the whole it looking like like you say, you're going to have potentially 10, 20, 30 years worth of research being able to explore other bubbles and other areas.
Unfortunately, now it seems like I was actually like getting a pizza the other day on campus, and this girl just started, and I was just start talking with this girl, and she was like, "Were you onto something? Because you started this 3 years ago." And I was like, "I was really hoping I'm not. I was really absolutely hoping I'm not onto something. I was really hoping I'm like, look, this was insane, but now it's over." And now it's like, okay, I guess we're going with I was onto something.
Yeah, I know. I feel you on that one, and I completely understand the anxiety around exploring a topic that is an area that you professionally is very good for you if it succeeds, but outside of that, not very good thing to see. But equally, by exploring it, hopefully we have a better understanding of what we can do to avoid situations, and hopefully people pick up on that. And that's where you want the bubble not to burst, but the bubble to attract people to it, to encourage them to stop the bubbles forming elsewhere.
Yeah, that was the idea. That was the idea. Like, here's how it happened, but let's think about preventing it in the future. And now I guess that's way more important, but also at the same time, it's looking like I don't think anyone will listen, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, like you say, you hopefully enough people will listen, and hopefully various different people who are, like you say, I do think different than certain situations. From someone who's outside of your field, I do think political consciousness is growing generally. I think that its levels of activity tends to be the contentious point. From an observational point of view, it seems to be a lot of people are conscious about things going on, what they can do about it, and how they can impact, prevent, whatever. That seems to be the area that is more, I would say, a delicate balance for most people to work out what they're doing.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's not a pretty answer. It's sort of like, you need to fund independent media. I'm sorry, and that needed to happen yesterday.
Yeah, and like you say, even with social media, is in theory accounts on various platforms as technically independent. There is a issue with that because, as we know, platforms will censor various different things, or in different ways they'll either stop it getting out at all, or they'll basically reduce it so hardly anyone sees it, which is basically a roundabout way of doing the exact same thing. But hopefully, like you say, there are ways around potentially funding more independent journalism or independent activism, I would probably argue, is different ways that potentially we could see it. Trying to be on the optimistic side anyway. On potential, take this question however you want to view it. So normally I would say who inspired you to be who you are today. But equally, if that is more, if someone's motivated you to pursue the topic and the area of research, by all means take it from either way. But what really inspired you or motivated you?
I don't know. There's two ways to answer this, I suppose. One way is sort of like the main figure as sort of like not so much positive, but lately I've been seeing a lot of these great TikToks of like being a hater is not the worst thing in the world. So I don't know how much people are aware, but there was this guy called Slobodan Milosevic, and he was like a really brutal dictator, warmonger, and growing up being aware of who he is and being in such proximity to that insanity overall, it's sort of like, I think what brought me to this moment, I guess being the hater of being a hater of these people is sort of like what drives me to be like, and you know what? And they suck on so many levels, and you then just go on and on and on. Which is not very inspirational or positive, but unfortunately, my topic is driven by like, and you know what? I don't like these people at all. But at the same time, what keeps me going is also, I wouldn't say like anyone famous or any character, sort of like friends and family and um, interactions such as this one, seeing you that you keep posting, seeing other friends on TikTok that they keep posting. So that's kind of what like motivates me. That's on a positive note. Like seeing a friend saying, hey, let's do something. Like today I was sitting down with somebody from my program, and we wanted to make a plan for future publications. That's sort of what keeps me going and what got me here, because I think if I didn't have emotional support and friends along the way, you can't be driven by pure hatred for dictators.
I get that, and I love the fact that this whole, I know there's different elements of generations where they've come to form that academic community. Like currently, you have academic TikTok. It used to be academic Twitter, and it's interesting to how those communities have formed. And like you say, the various conversations that have gone on between ourselves and with other people that we interact with. It's interesting to see not only how that can impact you in the online sphere, but also offline, because obviously you joined myself when we had a symposium on it, Imperial. So that was really great to have you along for that. And it's interesting to see that the connections that you make can have. I don't want to say these are the online connections aren't tangible, because they are for a lot of people, but it's how that can be replicated more into the formal setting of academia or in society more broadly. And obviously, I know your work is very on the pulse of society, which I suppose takes me on to a point about impact, because from most scholars and scientists want to have that firm impact. Being as we've been discussing, your topic is a very on the money, hot topic issue. But what do you hope to have an impact with your work?
I struggle with this a lot because I can having haven't engaged with this topic on micro levels. So now we can see what's happening in the United States, and the whole English speaking world is focused on this. And for a lot of people, this might be their first introduction to such a person, their first rodeo with such a person. But there's been many people like this person that we shall not name for the sake of the algorithm. Um, there's been many guys like that. For example, we have a few in Europe. in the EU itself as well, in Hungary, or in candidate states like Serbia. Some are also popping up in Slovakia and Slovenia. There's the HDZ party in Croatia that's been around forever. These are all mini examples of what the whole English speaking world is seeing right now. So having followed these mini examples for quite some time, I I could see where things were heading, and I looked like an insane person to most of my friends who are now, and I kept saying, I can see where this is heading, and I pray that I'm wrong. And I hope that in 2 months you come to me and say, Anna, you were so wrong, haha, and we'll all laugh about it. But everyone's coming to me and being like, Jesus Christ, was I blind? And I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with that at all. So I'm really hoping that a time will come where I will say, I will make a depressing prediction and it won't come true. I'm honestly, this is my hope and my dream, that one day somebody will publish something being like, you know what, this lady was wrong because everything is actually not so bad. And I'll be like, thank you. Thank you. I love that. I hope for more of that.
That's really interesting because, like you say, that goes. I understand the perspective, and I understand from a society point of view that perspective. But it's really interesting to hear. It, I would say, it conflicts with so many different researchers who, realistically, we want to be right. Fundamentally, most individuals, when you talk about their impact, I mean, most people that I've spoke about on this podcast, for example, have spoken more, I would say, in an abstract. Their impact to the general field, their impact to society generally, which obviously is what we hope for in academia. But in terms of our topics, in the ideal world, we'd like it to have a really profound impact. Whereas realistically, you're going against the grain of traditional academia, which is you want to be wrong.
I would love to be wrong. I would love nothing more.
I think that in itself is a point because I think it highlights the argument that so many people forget that you can learn from being wrong as well. So if your prediction is off, what was the cause of that prediction being off, and what was the saving grace of whatever potential country manages to steer the needle the other way?
Yes, because currently I don't see one, and I don't think there will be one for the country that we will not speak of because of the algorithm. But God, would I love to be wrong. I don't see many or any saving graces at this point, and God, would I love to be wrong.
I think, yeah, I get that entirely, and equally, I think from a general point, I mean, this could be a potential topic for its own discussion for quite a while. Is the world is probably one of the most unstable it has been. Even when I think back to like COVID and the financial crisis, that had both of them realistically had one issue that had a compound domino effect, whereas we have realistically societies around the world are having multiple effects. You're potentially seeing a breakdown of not necessarily the entire capitalistic system, but you are seeing severe challenges to it, and especially in a lot of places. Economically, the younger generations are poorer than they ever have been, and if you look at that in terms of an objective point, in terms of the generations that have come in now at least, are generations that are predicted to be poorer than their parents, which is a first and a
Yeah, we don't know how to cope with that. Like, there's nobody alive that can tell us how to cope with that, really.
yeah. So I think that's the whole how we change the social contract and what we can do, what a new social contract looks like, where the job is not for life, that you have different things where every podcasts that or most podcasts that you listen to about entrepreneurism, or you're making your own brand, whether that's in academia or whether that's in whatever field that someone's inspired to go and pursue. It's interesting to see how all of that is ingraining into our society and potentially creating new normals, and a challenge in itself as well. But on the flip of moving away slightly from more, let's say, the pessimistic elements that could come from predictions, what's the thing that excites you about either what you do in your work or what you do as a PhD candidate? What excites you?
Well, to be honest, I love the little happiness boost you get from teaching, because it's really, I don't think there's anything better that can happen to, I don't know, I guess especially in my field, as we said, it's a bit of a weird one, but the nicest thing that happens in this scenario is when a student approaches you and says something like, you reinvigorated my interest in my whole degree, or you reinvigorated my interest in the topic. I actually was about to lose interest in this whole degree, and now I'm curious. Now I have the will to do this again. I don't think there's anything nicer than hearing something like that. Or that, when somebody comes out of your classroom, whether it's TAing, whether I also teach digital literacy in the city, in like the adult education in the city council kind of thing that we have here. It's really, really nice when somebody comes out and says like, I'm actually going to go home and look more information about this. This changed my perspective, or like, I'm actually going to use this in my life from now on. There's nothing nicer than that, to be honest. And this is the whole reason why I would like to be a professor, because nobody wants to be writing depressing books and articles for their whole life. My desire is more to have people come out equipped with knowledge that they can actually use in their life, or that reinvigorates their interest. So this is the nicest thing, I think.
I suppose, like you say, though, it's interesting that a lot of the excitement in terms of that, which relates, I suppose, a bit back to what we were talking about with impact, is the next generation, or the people that you're teaching or you're discussing with, either they become more politically conscious, more media or socially literate, and that can have a profound impact. And whether that's directly into their professional life, or like in some cases, I'm sure some people, and like many people, just want to learn and want to know a bit more about a topic, and therefore, I'll go and explore this. It's something that's interesting, and that's what you want. What we want as educators, we want to see someone just hungry for knowledge.
Yeah, because I do feel like because of I guess, the state of the world, a lot of students come into the classroom, um, like they're forced at gunpoint almost to come there. I don't know if you had that experience, but I have. Uh, yeah, some of them come with like the energy as if I am there holding them at gunpoint to be there. So I try to break that tension. And once you break that tension and you get them to actually relax and understand that nobody was born knowing something, and it's all a skill that takes time, and, just take your time, learn something at your own pace. But yeah, just nobody's holding you at gunpoint. So it's really nice when you finally break that tension and you get through to someone and they come out actually interested in the topic. And that's I think what really drives me to stay in academia.
No, I think like you say though, I think the whole point around, like, not necessarily just there are cases where unfortunately students, particularly when they're compelled to be there. I'm thinking more of the pre-university age students. Like you say, when they've got to be there, they aren't there. There's some in that group that realistically, it's not the subject that they want to do. It's not they don't want to be in that room. They either want to be working, they want to be doing different things, and that's fine. And I think our system needs to somehow work out how we approach that, rather than the approach of, okay, this is an organized session where you can be in a room with someone and you'll learn something. And it's like, that's not necessarily how education works in its most fluid way. If the person doesn't want to be there and is staring at the clock the entire time, then they are not going to be the most engaged. And don't get me wrong, I'm from thinking back to when I was a student, and I'm sure you've had moments like this. There are lessons and there are teachers where you think, okay, I'm starting to fall asleep now in this session, and they don't. It's not the most exciting, or what's exciting for yourself might be different than what's exciting for me, and it's itself can be different. And I think, again, if I had a bottomless pot of money, then you could make it very small classes, very focused. But yeah, the idealist would love to see it, but yeah, the realist knows that it's unlikely. But what I want to do now, Anna, is move into a bit of a new challenge that I'm trying to do, which is trying to tell your story in 10 words or less. And these are some 5 just quick fire questions where I just want you to answer them as shortly and as briefly as you can, and really just tell my listeners a bit about your experiences and your story, so they can get to know you and you as a person and your scholarly journey without just our standard discussion. So to start off with, what did you want to be when you were younger?
Astronaut.
Okay. And how do you want to be seen professionally?
A hard one, to be honest, because like it's hard to find a word other than, but
It's interesting for someone who studies professional identity to hear, like you say, that different perspectives. So, thinking more about your work, can you describe your field or your work in 10 words or less?
God, everything's on fire. My field, well, it's a growing field and we haven't really figured out how to name it. So there's different names for it even, and we haven't even come to an agreement of what's the name for this whole thing. Some people say it's autocratization, some people say it's democratic backsliding, some people say, well, it can't be democratic backsliding at some point because it backslides so much that it's no longer a democracy. So it's really hard. Like there's not, then some people are saying maybe the name is digital authoritarianism because of the in changing nature of how we consume media that coincided with this wave of authoritarianism. It's really hard actually, because I really struggle with this, because when people ask me about it, I'm like, I don't know how to explain it in a few words, because actually the field hasn't landed on a word. And when you think about it, during similar times in our history, like nobody said World War One was World War One, because that would have implied they had the knowledge that there was going to be another one. So, um, so it's kind of like we haven't had a period of such intense regression of democratic norms for almost 100 years. So it's really hard to find words that aren't alarmist, but are at the same time explaining it. Because like it's all ongoing right now as we speak. Some people would say, is this? Others would say, no, well, this is more important than digital aspect is more important. No, it's basically same as it was before. And then some people are saying, no, it's very much new. So it's very hard. I think I don't think I'll have a word for what I'm doing or my field for another 10 years, to be honest with you. Right now, I think it's called a simulated democracy, which is something I find the closest. Like you're simulating, yeah, you're simulating parts where like you're pretending to have elections, you're pretending to have independent media, you pretend to have plurality, but you're not really doing it. So I don't know. I guess in the future, I would like to be an expert of a dead field.
That's a different way, and like you say, the bit at the start as well, the everything's on fire is sums up the situation, and like you say, I can completely see where you're coming from with trying to name a field that has contentious names by different individuals, but nonetheless interesting to hear how you're describing it.
Yeah, it's very hard because I think it's just not a done story. So I guess my dream is to go from a political scientist of contemporary issues to a historian. That's honestly my hope right now.
So I suppose next question is, what is the biggest challenge then for your field?
Where when you're doing a study, where to stop, because you'll notice something as a phenomena and then data will keep pouring in, and you might hope that by the time you finish writing, it's like, so you just have sometimes you have to stop, although there's more data coming in. So sometimes people focus on a particular election cycle just because then they can say, well, that was done. Or a particular movement. But that's even difficult because then sometimes these movements go on to be other movements and other movements. So I think that's the biggest problem right now, is if you're analyzing communication, when do you say, I'm done taking on articles, I'm done waiting for another speech, I'm gonna say the end of this analysis is April, and usually in May there's something else already that happens. So it's really hard to say, it's really hard to find a time period to choose and say, okay, I'm analyzing this for this reason, because everything is overlapping.
So like a longitudinal cross sectional challenge, like, which is it's a different experience than what I would say the sciences tend to have, which is a budgetary issue rather than you've got a time period issue.
Yeah, sometimes it's also the budget. Sometimes you would like to go do a survey, but yeah, you can't, and so on and so forth. But mostly it's also kind of methodologically, even if I'm saying I'm analyzing this government, but you're in under normal circumstances, a government is there for maybe maximum of 15 years. But that doesn't really happen in my field. Sometimes the government's there sometimes for 30 years. You expect it. There's many instances where you expect it not to be there.
Just as a bit of the last one for these quickfire questions, what's a surprising fact about you that most people who watch your content or who listen to your research wouldn't have a clue about?
I don't think I talk a lot about my, I don't think I talk a lot even about my research anymore, because I do feel like I do feel like it's not gonna make people feel better. So I'm trying more to talk about cozy games, hobbies. Um, I guess what people don't know is how bad it's about to get. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what else to say. And I don't think I talk about it enough, because I don't know if I want to be a part of, like,
It's fair enough.
raising alarms. I think there's enough alarms raised.
Well, like you say, I suppose it's quite easy, based on your field, you could quite easily go into political commentating, which is not what a lot of your content is focused on. So it'd be quite easy for you to justifiably, if you talked about your research a lot, you'd be a political commentator in everything but name.
No, yeah. Yeah, but I don't do that a lot on my profile at all, because I do feel like I would like to keep things more positive online if possible.
So that's the end of my quickfire questions. So I suppose this takes me now to more thinking about, we've talked about impact, but what would you want your legacy to be? That can be generally in your field, or it can be based on the impact that you have on other people. What would you like your legacy to be?
I think I want to be that, like, professor you remember. That's my hope. the professor that made your day better, that made you want to come to class, and not the professor that you dreaded coming to class for. That's something I hope to be. Professionally, oh God, my hope, my hope is that there's one day a mechanism set for these things not to happen, but I really doubt that's ever happening. So we're gonna stick to, I hope to make students' days better.
Okay. And on the flip of legacy, I want to talk about heritage, but not personal heritage. How do you think the heritage that you've had as an academic, so the lessons that you've learned and who you've been taught by, has had an impact on who you are?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I'm saying this. I had classes when I would come out of the class wanting to read 10 different books. I would come out wanting, I couldn't wait for another class. I was like, oh, what are we doing next? This is so interesting. Um, and those are the professors that, like, that I was like, that's who I want to be. That's how I want to be. That's how I want to make people feel. Um, and definitely I owe them how I owe them like a lot. They exposed me to a lot of ideas and also got me interested in a lot of things. But there's also, going back to the being a hater, there's also professors that made me dread getting up in the morning because their class is happening that day. Um, Not many, but that's also something that I think I learned a lot from. And that's something that I measure myself to. I'm like, I never want to be that. I never want to be that person. Um, I never want to be that presence in somebody's life where, uh, they dread getting into a bus to go to campus because of me. That's awful. Yeah. Cause my parents always used to say, oh, you're not going to think about that professor. You're not going to think about them in 10 years. I do. I do think about them very often. There was this professor in my BA who all she did was read from a notebook that her supervisor gave her in the 80s. And that was 2 hours of us sitting there and her just going from reading from a notebook, no PowerPoint, nothing, just her reading from a notebook from the 80s. And this was a class on contemporary French grammar. Oh my God. I My parents were like, you're not gonna remember, you're not gonna I remember. And this is what I aspire not to be.
Yeah, completely. I had a lecturer who, at university, one of the first opening lines in a welfare course was, "We need to think that lettuces also have feelings." And I'm thinking, that of most of her lessons, most of her seminars, that is the line that people remember. That is the takeaway point. And just the blank stares that were going on across that lecture theatre, looking at like, what are we sitting in?
There's a stereotype about a type of Eastern European professor that everyone knows, and they always say the same thing with a little variation. They're like, so it's a 5-point grading scale where 5 is the best and 0 is the worst. So they're like, you will probably come out of this class knowing to get barely a 2. Most of you, if you're good, maybe you'll get a 3. I might know for a 4, but only God knows for a 5. Um, so that type of attitude where it's like, don't even try because you're not going to get to my level. I'm not even at my level. There's only God above me or something like this. And oh my God, those are always the worst classes. And yeah, I never want to be that person. In my classroom, there can always be 100% for effort, if nothing. Like knowledge plus effort for me is 100%. I don't like that's you gave me your 100%, and here's 100% in grade form or something. I mean, I would never be like perfection is unreachable. It's a class. It's like one semester of their life. They have a life outside of this.
And I suppose thinking more about advice we give, And as we've talking about education, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out, whatever stage of their academic interest? So pitch it more towards college level. They're deciding on the university course.
I would say just like really take the time to think what you want to do, and it's fine. It's fine to pivot. It's fine to change. You you don't have to have it figure out right like in the moment. And if you think university is not for you, there's other forms of education. Like it's not just about university. There's also non-degree courses that can be very useful for, you know, whatever. Like think about what you want to do with your life, and then think about how to get there. And if you do need a master's degree or a university degree, then get it and let that be your motivation. But don't be there because your mom wants to brag to your friends. that's I think what I would say. Also another thing, choose a fun topic if you can. But if you are insane like me and are compelled to write to say something, I guess I'll see you around. We can have group therapy or something. But if you're not, choose a more fun topic.
That last point, the fun or interesting, I do think how we view different things of where we try to potentially perceive our careers. Obviously, we've got to make money, we've got to live, but you'll be more successful generally based on a topic that you're interested in. The question is, how many steps on the ladder do you need to get you there? Do you need the university degree, the master's degree, the PhD? Do you need to go and start a business? Do you need to go and get experience voluntarily, traveling? Whatever works for you.
Yeah, like for example, if somebody's interested more in like, I don't know, tourism, maybe they don't need to put themselves through like some sort of business course or something. Maybe there's more specialized courses for that. Like, I don't know. I feel like I also made sort of a weird choice with my BA. And if I was doing it all over again, I probably wouldn't end up with French and literature as my BA.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I learned a lot and it shaped me in my undergraduate degree. But when people ask the whole, do you wish you did the same thing if you did it over again? You want to say yes because it got me to where I am now. But objectively, it's not. I could have potentially got further with other things or learned more.
Yeah.
Hindsight 2020.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So like if I was starting all over again, I'd take more time to think about like my own interests. And yeah, like just put your interests on paper, and maybe it's not what other people are saying to you.
Just thinking now about. So one of the features that I try to do with sitting down with scholars is, what question would you ask the next content educator about their research or their content's impact? So from what they do, what do you want to know? What would you like to ask?
Yeah, I guess I would ask, and I would ask you this as well. Do you think that, like, how do you treat your presence online? Because sometimes I treat it as sort of like an online diary, and maybe it's more more about my hobby sometimes rather than my research. So I guess the question is, when you made a profile, did you already have a strategy in mind? Like, I'm going to just post about this, I'm just going to be a niche? Or was it kind of like, I'm going to experiment and post whatever I feel like, and then things happened? I don't know how to phrase that better, but ironic because I study communications. Yeah, sort of like, is your profile a niche or is it like a diary, I guess? Because mine, I think, is more like a diary than me finally sticking to a niche. Which I don't know, maybe I should. What about you?
I don't normally answer the question, but it's a good point. Really, my motivation was there's a lot of different ups and downs for your degrees, whether it be bachelor's or master's or now PhD. And when I look back and I think, I wish I learned something or remembered something more from how I felt about it, not just what I know about it. And that was something I learned from my PhD experience when I talked to students about their academic journey. What were those interactions that shaped them? So effectively, I'm trying to, similar to what you said, it's a journal of what my experiences are. But as I've evolved through it, it's kind of become, you're more than just your research. You're more than just that one experience. So it's the other identities that come in, the social you, the professional you, the you who works in academia, the you who has an interest in gaming, culture, whatever. And it's those type of elements that also come through. And so it similar for me. It also evolved into more of a general diary as well, but primarily academic and professional.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm thinking about the balance and I don't know it. But yeah, but I love your content on your chickens, by the way.
Yeah, they're a recent addition, and I do love sharing about them. And like you say, I've seen a number of your dog, and it's interesting. The animal stuff tends to be very easy to do, very nice to do, and generally speaking, it's very approachable and accessible for people to find you via. I mean, if someone finds me because they really like the chickens, then that is absolutely fine by me.
I do find that when I post something about like my dog, it doesn't do so well, to be honest. But I always think like she's a star. She's gonna get she is gonna get everything, and then I post and it's like 12 likes. And it's like, okay,
I think that animals seem to do better on Instagram from what I've seen.
maybe I should get on Instagram.
Maybe. But I suppose outside of that, and this was a question from my last guest, and this is speaking very similarly to what we were just discussing actually. What is the video that you found has performed the best, and what motivates you to do what you do?
I thought about this, and I think it's what you said. It's about like I think my best video was when I was talking about all the struggles about uh, of getting to a PhD, like all the rejections, and also to be honest with you, I was debating whether it's a PhD or a job, and I interviewed for some jobs as like analyst in a bank and stuff like that. And then I sat down with myself and I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. Um, and sharing that with um, people on TikTok saying, sometimes you interview for a job and you're not sure even if you want it, but then they reject you, and it's sort of like, ooh, that hurts on a different level. um, and sharing all these rejections that led to, because it's not like people become PhDs or PhD candidates like it happens and it's just like a straightforward path and it's all like yes, 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 and you're amazing. You get a lot of criticism about your work, and you get a lot of criticism about your applications and your research, and it's not really um it's not really like, oh, you pick a topic and then you just do a topic. There's a lot of rejections that happen behind the scenes. So sharing some of those vulnerabilities and some some struggles that happened, I think those posts did the best on TikTok because I think everyone can relate, even if you're not a PhD student candidate, even if you're not in academia, you can relate to, um, sending articles, applying for jobs, getting rejections. Everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, I think like you say, I post undergraduate job. I think I sent nigh on probably 50 applications out before I got my first, and it happens. Like you say, didn't get as many rejections from the PhD, but thankfully, but yeah, like you say, I think rejections are part and parcel of it.
Yeah. For me, like I got maybe like 7 rejections, or maybe like some acceptances, but without a scholarship, and I couldn't do that financially. For me, it was like while I was doing that, I was also toying with the idea of going into the industry as like an analyst, like a risk assessment analyst and stuff like that. And those somehow hurt more because I was like, I'm not even sure I want to do this. And you rejected me after a third round. Ah!
Yeah, 100%. And I've certainly been there. But I want to thank you for joining me, Anna, and talking to me about your academic journey on Sitting Down with Scholars. And hopefully someone approaches that question as well, just as intricately as what we've done with sharing our thoughts on it. So thank you very much for joining me, and thank you to my guests for listening to another episode of Sitting Down with Scholars.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I will share all of Anna's social media profiles.
Thank you.